大家好，我是 Olive Branch Allen. So going back to the fasting video that I did earlier, just responding to a lot of the questions I got on the differences between calorie restriction versus fasting. So I'm just going to go into a little bit of detail of what they mean to explain to you why they are actually not the same thing, but very much similar and interlinked. So from my previous video on fasting, I got a lot of comments and questions about that. Especially about calorie restriction and how that is the same or very different from fasting. And the truth is, there is actually a lot of similarities, but if done incorrectly, it actually can be very, very different effect. Let me explain to you what the major differences are between these two so that you can understand and do it properly if you wanted to. Okay, so calorie restriction. And as the name suggests, it means just have less calories. You're restricting the number of calories in the body. Okay, so you're just eating less. And we're not talking about what you're eating anymore. You're not talking about when you're eating, just eat less. And if you're a regular follower of my channel, then you'll know what my position is on regarding calories. But for the purposes of this video, we can still talk about it and use this term in a conceptual level. Now, fasting has been along for many, many, many years. Many religions have it in their practice. But it's basically you're not eating anything at all. So we're talking about 0 calories for a period of time. The exception is water, okay? So when you have 0 calories in, there are actually huge differences than just lowering the number of calories. The major difference between fasting and calorie restriction is that when you're fasting, your insulin level bottoms out to 0 because nothing's going in except water. Your insulin does not rise at all. Whereas if you're a calorie restriction, you could still be grazing. In other words, you can be eating a little bit food every hour, just a little bit of food, but just every hour to maintain a certain level of energy as people want in their body. Well, when that happens, anytime you're eating anything at all, it doesn't matter if it's sugar or even protein, is that insulin will rise. And that difference in insulin level in your body has a dramatic effect on what the body will do. The first thing that insulin does to the body is that it blocks leptin. Leptin is a hormone that your body fat actually creates. Anytime you've eaten food, leptin goes up to your brain to tell your brain you've had enough food, you can stop eating now. But when you have insulin, it actually blocks the leptin. So you don't feel like you've had enough food. You want to eat more. The second thing that insulin also does is that it blocks lipase, which is an enzyme that breaks down body fat. So if you're trying to lose fat, but you have insulin, then your body cannot break fat down. And you cannot use fat for energy, meaning what you're trying to do, losing fat, does not happen. So actually having a little bit of insulin and having no insulin has a big difference to the final effect to the body. The final point is that insulin has been shown to be the cause of many, many of the chronic diseases that now plague modern society, like cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's, even dementia, high cholesterol levels, diabetes. These are all linked to insulin. So the lower insulin you have, the better off you will be. So the most common type of fasting that you might be hearing nowadays is intermittent fasting, or more accurately termed is time-restricted feeding, which basically means in a day, the amount of time that you can eat is only this much time, meaning the rest of the time you're not eating. That's the fasting period, and that's when your insulin level is low. So in the beginning, you can start off with 14 hours of no eating and only 10 hours of feeding. And then as you get better, that 14 hours starts to grow to 16, 18, 20 hours of no eating. And this type of system is intermittent fasting because you're going to be eating and then you're not eating, eating and not eating. Once you start to fast for a longer periods of time, no food up to 3 days, that's when you're going to get into what's called autophagy. And this is actually a bigger topic that I can do another future video on. But I did mention a bit about this in my previous video on fasting, so I do recommend that you check that out. So there's many protocols of fasting that you guys just need to understand, but it's very different from calorie restriction if you're still eating at regular hours of the day. So calorie restriction in general can mean many things. In the end, by definition, it just means less calories, whereas fasting is very specific, meaning no food, just water going in. So hopefully that was useful for you guys. And if you have more questions or comments, please leave them down below. And I'll see you next time.